Effie and welcome to my final wrap up for 2024. This video is going to cover my November and December reads, and as always I'm only talking about books that I read for the first time because I don't cover rereads unless I'm doing them for a very specific video. Before we get into me talking about all the different books that I've read in the past month and a half-ish, a month and 2/3 more like probably, I just wanted to ask for a wee bit of feedback if you don't mind. So I mentioned this a couple of months ago and it's something that I've been ruminating on for a while, and I don't know whether these wrap-ups are something that I'm going to continue into the new year. Like, I'm still going to be talking about books, I'm still going to be here yapping about the things that I love, the things that I don't enjoy. I mean, let's be honest, more often than not it's the things I enjoy, because as much as negative videos perform better, it's just more enjoyable to talk about the books you enjoy. But I've noticed more and more that these wrap-ups oftentimes will be doubling up on other content. This was particularly the case around the middle of the year when I was reading for the Hugo Awards, trying to figure out who I was going to vote in all those various categories, and basically all of my reading was devoted to those books. So doing a wrap-up when I'm not really reading much outside of that felt a little bit extra, a little bit like I was just repeating myself and there wasn't much value added by talking about those books in two different places. Also, I now have my regular videos where I talk about vampire books that I've been reading recently, and since a good chunk of my reading is vampire books, we're getting a doubling up there as well. So I guess my question for you is kind of twofold. One, are monthly wrap-ups something that you would continue to be interested in seeing? The asterisk being sometimes I miss a month and I double them up, but in general, with the best intentions laid out, is it something you still want to see? Do you still want me to talk about the books that I've read in that month, regardless of if I'm talking about them in multiple videos? And I guess the follow-up question to that would be, if I'm not doing monthly wrap-ups, is there something in particular you would be liking to see instead? Should I just group together similar kind of books? Like my best friend, whose channel is Head in the Books, she does regular mystery thriller review videos where she'll talk about, I'm going to say like 3 to 5 books of a similar genre together. Is that something you'd be interested to see from me, where I group together, 3 to 5? I don't know. It would depend on what I'm reading at that point. Books that have a similar theme. Would you like to see more vlog content? I'm genuinely asking because as much as I enjoy doing this, I also want to be making content that people are enjoying seeing from me. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments as you're watching this. If you have thoughts, comment those as well. I don't know. Apparently this is making really uncomfortable. I don't know why. And also, if I am not giving you enough information about any of these books, I guess that's the thing as well. If I'm continuing wrap-ups, is there something that I'm not including in my wrap-ups at present that you'd like to see? I'm aware I don't often talk about star ratings. I will be doing what I read in a week videos every week in 2025. And now I've put that out into the world, you have to hold me accountable. And in those videos, I will be including ratings for every book that I read for the first time. So, my ratings will be out there. But it was a conscious effort not to talk about ratings in these videos because I wanted it to be qualitative rather than quantitative. But the thing is, if overwhelmingly people want to know my ratings, I can either include them or you can ask me in the comments. I'm not gonna keep them secret, and I'm rubbish at keeping my Storygraph up to date, But when it is up to date, like, all my ratings are going to be on there, because I do rate books. I just don't always talk about the ratings that I've given to books. Anyway, I've yapped for so long, or it feels like so long, so let's just jump into the books. So first up, we have 2 books by Ben Alderson. I think there's 3 books by him in total on this list. So we've got books 1 and 2 of the Realm of the Fae series, which is A Betrayal of Storms and A Kingdom of Lies. Obviously, with one of these being a sequel, talking about them is a little tricky, but essentially the Realm of the Fae begins with this character of Robin, who is kidnapped by some guys from his village and essentially sold to Fae hunters for coin. Robin is half Fae, that is not a secret to him. He has always known he is half Fae, but what begins with him being kidnapped is this incredible journey into the world of the Fae, into a world that's on the brink of war, and he uncovers all kinds of things about his heritage that he didn't know before, because he's grown up knowing he's half Fae, but not really knowing anything beyond that. And at the same time, you've also got this sizzling romance where in A Betrayal of Storms, he feels this immediate attraction to this surly Fae who has been tasked as his bodyguard. And then the romance continues in Kingdom of Lies. And I am absolutely enamoured with this series. At no point do I know what's going to happen next. And it is so delightful to get lost in this world. And it feels really bittersweet because I just read these for the first time. They've been republished because Alderson got a trad publishing deal with Angry Robot. So books 1 to 3 have been republished, and then book 4 is coming in May of next year. And it feels really bittersweet to have this series that I've only just discovered and then it's almost over. But also, Alderson's got a really large back catalogue, so I'm excited to dive more into that and explore more of the worlds that he's created. But I highly, highly recommend this series. There's just something so enchanting about them, and I can't wait to continue the series in the new year. Cruel is the Light by Sophie Clarke comes out at the beginning of 2025. Well, depending on your region, if you're in Australia or the UK, then it's coming out towards the end of January. However, if you are in the US, it's not coming out until May. And I guess beyond those territories, it's wherever it's easiest for you to get your hands on the book. So in this book, there's this reimagining of the Vatican, essentially, like the Catholic Church, the Vatican. It's not really Catholic, but like you can see the sort of inspirations. So you've got this god who's called the Undying God, and he is like pinned in their holiest of holiest. Like their god is literally in the center of what we would know as the Vatican City. And you have these exorcists who are battling against demons who, like, the demons are the reason their god is in their holiest of holy, bleeding out constantly. And the exorcists are constantly battling against the demons, but they've also made pacts with demons in order to get more power. So you've got this exorcist who is known as the Butcher of Rome, and she crosses paths with this, I'm going to call him an orphan boy, but he is like an adult, like a young adult, like 18, 20, something like that. And they cross paths, and for various reasons, they end up having to pretend that they are engaged. And then along the way, they're finding out all kinds of secrets about themselves, about each other, and about the corruption at the heart of it's not the Vatican, but I can't remember what it's called, the holy order that lives in Rome. So there's a lot of like yearning, you know, brushes. He puts gloves on her. It's like, it's very kind of slow burning. Though I don't know if it is technically a slow burn because they do get together within the first book, but there is this slow burn, and I loved all the revealing of secrets slowly throughout the book. And I also really enjoyed the exploration of good and evil and what truly is good and what truly is bad. And it reminded me a lot of the Monsters of Verity series, where you're kind of going, okay, is the humans the bad guys or the demons? It's fantastic. And I think a lot of people are going to fall in love with this book next year. His Mate by Resistance by Mel Aitchess is the second book in the Lunati Pack series, which follows 3 crime families in this city that I think is called Trinity City. So the werewolves control the arms, the witches control the drugs, and the vampires control the trafficking. Each of these books is a standalone, but you do see characters popping up, and there is a little bit of a like overarching story, but not in any way where you can't just pick up on any book. So this one follows a werewolf who's a member of the Lunati Pack and a witch who is not associated with the rest of the witches who are running the drugs. This witch in particular owns a club that is seen as neutral ground, and when there are several attempts on the life of the werewolf, the werewolf pack basically blackmails, very strongly persuades this club-owning witch to take this werewolf in and protect him because his club is neutral ground, and also this witch is incredibly powerful. And part of the cover for this is that the witch and the werewolf are fake dating, and it goes as delightfully as fake dating always goes. You know, you see them slowly falling in love with each other. You see them protecting each other in little ways and big ways. And it's just wonderful. Like, I loved His Mate by Vengeance, but that featured a vampire, so it was going to be an easy sell for me, theoretically. So this one was me really realising that I do love this series very much, because yes, the vampire pops up again, but this isn't about a vampire. This is about a witch and a werewolf, and it still works fantastically. And I can't wait for the rest of the series to come out. I think I'm going to be devouring them voraciously. Seducing Scylla by Lex Logan is a sapphic monster romance where a woman ends up on this magical island, and Scylla, who's been isolated from people for, you know, hundreds, thousands of years, ends up immediately falling for this woman, and they fall in love. It's very cute. I think the book got a lot stronger once Scylla came into the story, but I think it spent probably too long establishing how this woman got to be on this island. I think it was something like 25% of the book, considering this is a novella, was spent on this woman getting kidnapped, the attempt at trafficking, a shipwreck, and I just didn't care. Like, I get it's important to establish it, and I don't know if it's a case of it's establishing it so that the rest of the series can kind of get going and you know where everything started, but I just wanted it to get into the story, and it is really enjoyable once Scylla comes along and you have these two characters like that don't even speak the same language trying to get along and feeling immediate attraction. I just wish it had been a bit tighter at the start of the story. Keep It in the Dark by Justin Arnold was one of my favourite books that I read this year, and it's so exciting when that happens, like right at the end of the year. Although looking at my list, I've still got quite a lot of books to get through. So maybe it wasn't quite as at the end of the year as I thought it was. But it works so well. So we've got this vampire prince who has been sent to this really respected boarding school in the town that he lives in. So he's not super far from his family. And he has to kind of prove himself, you know, that he's not gonna munch crunch on the humans, because as a prince he's expected to go on diplomatic missions, but he can't be doing that if he's gonna bite every human he meets. So he's sent to this school so that no one finds out the truth about him. And he ends up having to room with the headmaster's son, and the headmaster very quickly gets pulled into this world of vampire hunters. But, you know, these two characters start falling for each other. There is an immediate attraction when they first meet, but they hate each other's guts. Like, they are what each other theoretically hates in this world, except they start to realise they have a lot more in common than they first realise, and it ends up being really cute. But what worked so well for me about this book was the way that the line between queerness and vampirism was so beautifully blurred. So this isn't just romance. I mean, very few things are just. But this is a book that's talking directly to queer youth and going, it's not right that someone tries to put conditions on their love. Like, you should be loved unconditionally, and someone saying that your queerness is an issue for them is a them problem. This book was gorgeous. The Witch and His Crow by Ben Alderson, another Ben Alderson, follows a witch as he has to enter into a series of trials, and I love a book with trials, to find the next Grand High, who is like the leader of all the witches. But he knows that there is a witch hunter who is part of these trials, so he's trying to figure out who this witch hunter is, and also possibly win the trials along the way. Basically, these trials, you either die or you drop out or you win, but only one person can win, so the stakes are incredibly high. But at the same time, you can only get to that point if you form alliances. And he is very suspicious of everyone. His parents were essentially murdered in front of him when he was just a child. And after that point, he kind of disappeared from witch society. And it just so happens that he ended up being found, and that's how he gets dragged into all this witch trials. So he's very reluctant to form any kind of alliances initially, but then he finds friendship and also romance whilst in the trials. But at the same time, he's still suspicious. He's still deeply suspicious. And I couldn't stop reading it. It was so addictive and quite easily could be my favourite Ben Alderson that I've read so far. No Place Left to Hide is the newest Meg and Lally that comes out in January of next year. And in this, we are following a girl who is destined for an Ivy League school, but she has been blackmailed about some mysterious event that happened the summer before. And it's really hard to talk about this book. Yeah, I can't really say much more than that, because it is so hard to not give the game away with this book. But I took a minute to get into this story, and for a large chunk of it, I just was like, I'm just not feeling the magic here. And then by the end of it, I was absolutely blown away. I was like, how did this book go from a book I absolutely despised to a book that wowed me? It was incredible. I mean, do I think it's better than That's Not My Name? No, But then That's Not My Name did what it was intending to do so spectacularly. And that's not to say that No Place Left to Hide doesn't. It is a masterclass in what it is doing. But it's hard to get beyond the fact that it took me so long to get into the story. But I still highly recommend it, because once you click what's happening, once things start to become revealed, it's incredible. Blazing Desires by Jasmine Andrady is a contemporary romance between a kind of like a mob boss sort of situation. Like, it's not explicitly mafia, but like crime boss, that's it. Between a crime boss's daughter and the man who has been sent to bodyguard her. But there's a bit more to it. Like, they know each other, but she doesn't know that she knows him. So all through the story, until it gets kind of revealed, he's calling her this pet name and she's going, why does this ring a bell? And then it gets revealed and it's really cute. So, you know, if you like the kind of book where it's very much touch her and you die, and he takes that to the extreme and actually kills people who touch her or threaten to touch her, this is the book for you. Like, I love that in books, specifically in books, not in real life. I'm all about cinnamon rolls in real life. But in books, there's just something so irresistible about it. And I really enjoyed the way that this book was written. I had a good time. The Crack at the Heart of Everything by Fiona Fenn is a grumpy sunshine fantasy that's quite cozy, which is, you know, I didn't think I'd be into a cozy book, but I really was. I mean, I'm finding more and more that it's actually not cozy that's an issue for me. It's just specific cozy books haven't worked for me. So in this book, we are following a warlock who has managed to place a curse on himself that means that hellbeasts are coming after him and trying to kill him. He has been very isolated because for the past, basically his whole life, he's been helping the evil empress win her territory. So when he's exiled because this curse is impacting other people within the Empress's castle, he is all alone, except there's this sunshiny royal guard who decides that he is going to join the warlock and kind of protect him. And it's just this really gentle, soft romance between these two characters as the warlock is learning to let people in and learning to allow himself to be loved. And the royal guard is just being a joy at every turn. By the Pint by Jemma Croft is another grumpy sunshine, but in this one we have a sunshiny vampire who is, I think he's about 600 years old, and a grumpy human. The sunshiny vampire, though, does come with some baggage. Like, he got imprisoned a couple of 100 years ago because his brother, you know, by blood, they were turned into vampires at the same time. He basically made this vampire go down for the crime that he committed. And at that point, when he was released from prison, he had to build his life up from the ground again because he had no one and nothing. And, you know, at the point in the story that we meet him, he's just this really soft character who loves quilting and uses his secret telekinetic power to do quilting. He's just an absolute delight, and I love that despite being sunshiny, he did have baggage. It was such an optimistic take. And then the human character desperately wants to become a vampire. and it's kind of all he's ever wanted. But then he meets this vampire and he's just enamored with him, and he starts to question what he wants. And the problem is, in this world, when someone becomes a vampire, they lose all of their memories from being a human. So these characters kind of feel like they've got an expiry date, because if this human continues along the path of becoming a vampire, they lose everything. They lose this love that they have found together. And it was so, I apparently I don't have the words to talk about how much I enjoyed this book, but I really did. I think it had a fantastic sense of humour. It balanced the heavy with the soft, and I can't wait to go back and read the other books in this series, which are a series of standalones that are all these different flatmates. So in the first and second book in the series, you're following different flatmates of the Sunshiny Vampire, and I just can't wait to meet them and read their love stories. The Saint of Heartbreak by Morgan Dante is, I believe, Bible slash is the correct term. It is a romance between Judas Iscariot and the devil. It's full of a lot of pining and pain, as this is a story that takes place over, I think it's like 2,000 years, from the point that Iscariot died until, I think, basically modern times, because Iscariot doesn't feel deserving of love, and the devil just immediately wants to sweep Iscariot up and take care of him, but Iscariot's so reluctant to even accept any tenderness. So it's a very slow, lyrical story of these two opening up and letting themselves be loved. And the devil carries his own pain. Like, the devil had children who were all smite. He had children that he carried himself. He carried half of his children. Lilith carried the other half. And they all got smote. And he's dealing with that as well. He's going, like, how can I open myself up to love after losing so much? But he is much more open to that possibility than Iscariot. But at the same time, you can see the pain from losing all of his children carries over into the pain that he experiences every time that Judas chooses to hurt himself, because he doesn't feel like he deserves even a sprinkling of happiness. Oh, this book was absolutely gorgeous and will have you weeping and swooning in equal parts. Trigger by C.G. Moore was a book that didn't work for me. I think the subject matter is something that, you know, we need books about, but the format of this was what really didn't work. So the general concept of this story is that a young boy wakes up in a park and slowly realizes that he has been essayed, and then he realizes that his boyfriend may have had a part in that. But this obviously is a story, as I say, that needs to be told. But the problem was, it was told in verse, and I don't have the best of history with books that are novel in verse. I just find the format really difficult to get sucked into. And specifically, what didn't work for me about this book was the fact that the language felt very sparse. I felt like we only got the surface level of everything that was being told. And quite honestly, I'm not sure if the blurb hadn't told me what had happened, if I'd really have understood anything that was happening in this story. But I find it really hard to be like, don't read this, because one, it's very much an individual thing that the format didn't work. And two, as I say, we need more books about this subject matter, especially because this is a YA book, and we need books that teenagers can see themselves in if they've experienced this and know that they are not alone. And then we're into the majority of Christmas books. Actually, there are a couple of non-Christmas books amongst this batch, but generally it's Christmas books. If I don't say very much about any of these books, know that I do have 2 vlogs where I read Christmas books, so you know, you're going to have a bit more of my thoughts as I went along with these books. So first up, we have Naughty or Nice by Sophie Snow. Sophie Snow is one of my favourite authors. I was lucky enough to read an arc of her first book that came out, I think it was September 2023, and every release I am so excited to read, and every release has been a 5-star and a win for me. So Naughty or Nice is an age gap romance between a photographer that steps up to help her best friend around Christmas time as they need a photographer for their store's Santa, and her best friend's uncle, who has stepped in to be the Santa this year. The age gap, age gap's a funny one. Like, I think Snow is very conscious of age gap being an issue for people. So the age gap is generally the younger character is on the older side already. So in this case, I think she's like 28, 29. And I think there's a 17-year age gap between them. So, you know, it's still an age gap. The dynamic is something that could potentially be uncomfortable, especially because our FMC is kind of like an additional kid to this family. But Snow is very aware of these things when writing, so, you know, they are directly discussed on page. You have characters going, she feels like our kid. What are you doing? And then also, like, this is the first time these characters have met, so despite the FMC being like an additional kid to the best friend's family, the uncle hasn't met her until this time when they're working together in this store over Christmas. And obviously that does change the dynamic. Like, the fact that he never knew her as a kid, you know, it really does shake things up. But also, it's not going to work for everyone because age gaps are inherently a difficult dynamic for people to get around. And, you know, I'll be the first one to say that age gaps are a difficult thing for me. And a lot of the time, age gaps don't work for me. But when Sophie Snow writes an age gap, it works. So this romance. It's very gentle, it's very cozy. It is a holiday novella, so we do have a lot of just good cozy feelings with it. There's no third act breakup, and I just overall just had a good time with this book, and I don't know what else to say. Please read it. Please read Sophie Snow's books. They're so good. Forged by Malice by Elizabeth Helen is not a Christmas book. It's just, apparently I finished it amongst all my other Christmas books. So it is the 3rd book in the Beasts of the Briar series that I absolutely despise this series but cannot stop reading. I wish I could remember much about this book, but apparently they all just merge into one. This is a reverse harem waichus. I don't know what language it uses to describe this series, but we are following a FMC who ends up in a land of fae, and she finds her mate, except her mate ends up being 4 guys. and each book is a different guy, and I am so bored of these books. No, I'm not. I'm sure I'm going to go more into why this series doesn't work for me in my most disappointing video. So a little spoiler for that. But I think essentially what doesn't work for me is the pacing of her finding the connections with these fae. Because the thing is, you know from the bloody synopsis that they're all her mates. The synopsis of book 1 is like, oh yeah, all 4 of them are her mates. And yet by the end of book 3, she's only mated with 3 of them. Well, I say mated in inverted commas, like she has screwed them all many times, it feels like. There's just constant screwing in these books. But she's only like got a mate bond with 3 of them, but then she doesn't, but she does. Oh, I don't know. They're just not my jam. But at the same time, there's a really compelling fantasy plot going on. And I think that's the issue, is that if I was writing these stories, which, you know, it's not in my capability to write something this complex, but if I was writing these, I would have the connections come first. Yes, you can have the fantasy plot building out behind the scenes or like at the same time, but I would have the connections come first so that you're not trudging through these books going, okay, is she going to connect with this character now? Is she going to connect with this character? And I think what made this book particularly difficult for me is the consequences of some of the stuff towards the end of it. Obviously, I need to be incredibly vague to not spoil it for anyone who perhaps has not read this book. But I just feel so conflicted because there's certain things where I kind of go, okay, I like this turn of events, but then how does that play in the story as a whole? And like, I've started book 4, but 1, I've kind of paused all new reads until the new year, and 2, I believe it ends on a cliffhanger, which I'm not super excited to get to. But yeah, just I don't know, these books are aggravating because it is a very intriguing fantasy plotline, but there's just so much spice. And like I've said this multiple times, but I don't mind, like, I don't mind anything from like closed door to, you know, door widely flung open. The problem becomes when I feel like the balance is off. I feel like I've got this plot line that's developing, but we're taking the time to have these characters shag rather than actually focus on the bit that's interesting. And I think it's a fine balance. And I think 3 books in, the balance should be found, but we don't have that balance. And that's made particularly difficult when she's got 4 suitors. So she's just constantly cycling between them and going and having sex with one and then having sex with another. Right. I'm going to move on from this one because I probably talked about this one more than any other book on my list. Deck the Halls by Wren v. Lothaire is... it's actually more of a short story than anything. I think it's only about 18 pages long, but it's this really tender story between 2 characters as they prepare for, I think it's Yule. So we've got a trans man and a wild fae, and they're just so cute together. And I think this is a good book to like dip your toe into a monster romance where the monster is a little bit monstrous when the spice is happening, like not too monstrous, but just a little bit different. I mean, I say that as if like Seducing Scylla doesn't include tentacles, but you know what I mean. I need to speak quicker because I'm going to run out of battery very, very soon. So, All I Want for Christmas is a Vampire by Amity Gray is absolutely appalling. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to rush through these. I'm going to pause the video here and then I'm going to figure out how to charge up and then I will be back. Okay, we've figured out a way to be charged up, so let's get back to it. So I was talking about all I want for Xmas is a vampire and how much I despised it. So first off, you look at this cover and you don't think, oh, this is a dark romance. And you read this book and you go, this is not a dark romance. This author does not know what a dark romance means. But anyway, like, full credit to it. It does include an author's note that tells you it's a dark romance, supposedly. But it just wasn't very well written. And it contained something that I despise. And that is the essay of our FMC. And not only that, but like, it does nothing for the plot overall. Like, the thing is, there's very, very, very few situations where that is actually necessary for the plot of a book, a film, a movie, whatever. But specifically in this case, there seemed to be no real reason why this happened. There wasn't any real, like, meaningful fallout, which is ridiculous, from it. And it just kind of got rushed over and was like, la la la, we're happy now. And it's like, no, this is not how you handle this. You have the audacity to write a very detailed, graphic, on-page essay of our FMC, and then you don't have the courtesy to even, like, deal with the aftermath properly, especially when there's an implication of, like, moments she can't remember and the lasting psychological impact that would have on her. Oh, this book made me so incredibly angry. And, like, even beyond that, this romance, so FMC's human, MMC is a vampire, and, like, there's a bit of, like, stalkerish behaviour to, like, the start of their relationship already, which obviously is not a good start. But then it was like the author couldn't decide whether their relationship was going to be cutesy or whether their relationship was going to be, she really should be running for the hills here, because some moments they'd just be like completely like soppy, gone for each other, and then other moments he'd burst in and kind of force himself on her while she's drunk because she had the audacity to be being, like, assaulted by someone she thought was a friend. And it's like, get your act together. Oh, I hated this book with a fiery passion. And I hate even more that because I hated it so much, I have to talk about it in multiple videos because it's the end of the year and it's worst books of the year. And this book is my nemesis at this point. A book I didn't dislike was The Santa Pageant by Lillian Barry, and this one surprised me because it has a character called Effie, and the other time that I've read a book recently with a character called Effie, it drove me insane. Like, not literally, obviously, but I wanted to pull my hair out reading it. It made me so deeply uncomfortable, and it was, like, worse still because it's actually a really good book, but I just couldn't get behind it. But this book really worked for me. I still had a little bit lingering discomfort, especially because it was just so cool. Like, we had a female character called Effie and then a non-binary character. And it was like, oh, couldn't you have swapped their names around? That probably would have made it more comfortable for me. I don't know if it would have, but, like, theoretically probably would have made it more comfortable. But I really enjoyed this kind of second chance romance with them. And second chance romance and friends to lovers often don't particularly work for me because the time isn't taken to establish why these characters like one another. I often see it being used as a shortcut, like going, oh, well, they were friends, so obviously there's already something there, or like they've previously dated, so obviously there's something there. But this felt like the time was taken to establish why these characters were attracted to one another, why they wanted to be together. And in addition to that, there was some beautiful conversations around gender identity that I really appreciated. And it was just a fun concept. These 6 characters competing in a pageant to become the Santa. And it was a very joyful book. Obviously it's tackling some tricky things, but overall it was just filled with so much joy that I was just so happy reading this book. Corporate Mandated Holiday Romance by Nellie Wilson was a book that took me by surprise. So I picked it up because the author of the Santa Pageant had posted on Instagram recommending this and basically being like, read this if you hate billionaires. And I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. Give that a try because, you know, given certain things that have happened in the US recently, I'm very much down for an eat the rich kind of holiday romance. I mean, I'm often down for eat the rich energy. That's not to say that I don't love myself a billionaire millionaire romance, but very intrigued by the concept of this. And basically we have our FMC who lands what she thinks is her dream job, working for a climate positive company. And then she realizes that there's a bit of greenwashing going on, and not only that, but her boss is incredibly skeezy. So she engages in a fake dating situation with a journalist that she happens to meet through her roommate in order that they can both attend the corporate mandated holiday parties. And there's a good amount of cultural exchange going on because he is Jewish, so she's learning about his Jewish traditions and she's teaching him about Christmas traditions. And it's so wholesome, and the reporter love interest character is really nerdy but in a very attractive, sexy way. And by the end of the book, or at the end of the book when it was all over, I definitely had a book hangover and I wanted more from this character because I missed him deeply in my heart. And I don't know why it surprised me so much that this was so good. I think because it was a book that wasn't even on my radar, and then I picked it up and absolutely unapologetically fell in love with it. Make the Season Bright by Ashley Herring Blake is from the same author as books like Delilah Green Doesn't Care, which I loved. Delilah Green Doesn't Care, but then Astrid Parker Can't Fail, I think it's called, or Doesn't Fail, didn't quite work for me. So I was like, which side of the spectrum am I going to fall on with this one? Like, that's not to say I didn't like Astrid Parker, it just wasn't as amazing as Delilah Green. So Make the Season Bright is a second chance romance between these 2 women that 5 years ago, one of them got stood up at the altar by the other one. And they end up in a situation where they're both independently invited to the same family Christmas, and then they have to compete in the seasonal speed dating sort of situation that's going on, and they are reconnecting and re-understanding each other. It did take me a minute to get on board with one of the characters because one of the characters was very kind of snarky and not really communicating why she felt the way she was. So that was the character of Brighton. But the character of Charlotte, because this book opens in media res, she's trapped in a lift, she's having panic attacks, she's thinking about this Christmas curse that she has. You immediately connect with Charlotte because you're like, okay, great anxiety rep, she's having panic attacks, she hates the season. Like, there's a lot of things that immediately make you connect with this character, whereas Brighton feels very bratty and spoiled. Like, by the end of the book, you do understand her a bit more, and you're going, okay, so she just doesn't have the skills to properly communicate what she needed, or at least didn't. But they work so well together. You can see how a second chance romance feels correct for these characters, and you can see how they have grown and are pursuing things that matter to them, and that's part of how they're able to come back together again. Santa is a Slut by Drea Denae is a pretty simple, pretty low stakes, high heat book where a guy takes over as the Santa of this like holiday superstore kind of thing, and he's also the big boss. He's implementing a lot of changes, and it's basically these four characters kind of getting together and deciding to become a polycule. That's the most total of it. Like, there's a little bit of like saving the store, but because it's low stakes, it's very easily resolved. And it's mostly just all the different combinations of these characters being together. 'Tis the Season for Revenge by Morgan Elizabeth is a Legally Blonde inspired Christmas romance. A woman is dumped by her boyfriend on Halloween for not being serious enough to be his girlfriend. He's a lawyer. So she does what you do. She gets together with her friends, she gets drunk, and she ends up making a dating profile and matches with her ex-boyfriend's boss, and thus begins this plan where she will date her ex-boyfriend's boss and get invited to the Christmas party, the workplace Christmas party that is, and show her just what a mistake he made. I think the big part of what made this work so effectively was the fact that it was never her goal to get her ex back, and very quickly she started to realise all the different ways that their relationship was toxic and abusive. So that never being something that was on the table made it so much easier to root for these characters, because there's no conflict of, oh, I'm falling for him but I still like him. She's like, no, my ex was trash, let's move on. I think another part of it was the fact that these characters were clearly very compatible from their first date. They worked well together, and there was such a high level of mutual respect that basically had you swooning for them. And overall, I had a really good time with it. I do think there was slightly too many spicy scenes, so the balance felt a bit off, but the plot was fantastic. The romance really worked for me, and I had a good time reading it. And it surprised me because reading through the blurb, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be my thing, but I'm so glad that I gave it a chance. One More Gift by Holly June Smith is a novella where an almost divorced woman is spending the Christmas holidays in her kind of country cottage getaway, and she's invited a longtime friend so that she can reconnect with him, and hopefully it'll be the start of something good for them. And then her almost ex-husband comes along and wants to give her one last gift, or, well, sorry, one more gift, that should be. And it's a threesome. And I think, like, and I had a good time with this one as well. The elements that worked for me was the fact that the divorce was amicable, and it was a case of these characters wanted different things in their life, so they realised that they couldn't stay married because they had different visions for where they wanted their life to go, but they still had so much love for one another. And I think there was even a line that was basically like, we loved each other so much, that's why we divorced, because they did not want the same things. and they wanted to see each other happy. And then I think another aspect was that there was a element of exploring sexuality. So the friend that got invited initially didn't even contemplate that he might not be straight, and then very organically through the book he explored possibilities of more, and that really worked in this story as well. And then there's something that happens at the end that really just wrapped it up in a nice bow for me. I promise we are almost done. This has been a bit of a mammoth video, which feels correct, I guess, to finish the year on a wrap-up that is a bit of a beast. So Hook Up to Holiday by Rose Santoriello. This is a cutesy kind of romance between an elf-born and an orcling. So they have an exciting night of passion, and then they realise that they are boss and underling, and as a result of that they can't be together. But they are still very much attracted to each other, so they agree to holiday. They will be together for a short period of time, being each other's dates to some holiday events, and then they will move on with their lives. So it's a little bit spicy, but not too overly spicy. And the best part about this was the subversion of, like, we can't be together because of X, and oftentimes that means someone ends up having to give up something. But actually, the resolution for this was someone having to actually realise their dreams, which was a gorgeous way to resolve this conflict that has been running through the story. Set the Record Straight by Hannah Bonham Young is another Christmas romance, like they almost all have been, and it is between two neurodivergent characters who agree to fake date after a misunderstanding at one of their workplaces means that one of the characters' bosses believes her to be queer, so she is fake dating her best friend, but she very quickly realises that, oh, maybe she actually is queer, and they start to explore that. Because our characters have autism and ADHD, they communicate beautifully, and they also understand each other's quirks, and it was so refreshing to see this very transparent communication and this kind of reinforcing of, oh, you're overstimulated, okay, let me do the things that you need in this moment. Let me see this not as something to take personally, but as a way to support you. There was just something so gorgeous about it, and I am obsessed. I need more books where you have neurodivergent leads, because this is what I want to see in my romances. I want to see this high level of communication. I want to see this just unerring support for the things that you need in your life. And it shouldn't be seen as a burden to provide support to your partner in this way. Slayed by Penelope Ward and V. Keeland is a collection of 3 Christmassy short stories. I like this writing duo. I think they write engaging and fun stories together. And I had an overall good time with this. There were a few moments that made me cry a bit. I did have a little bit of an issue with the middle story, as there was a disabled child who was used as a kind of inspiring story that I didn't love. I mean, it was one of these where it's like, I don't know if it was like overtly bad, but it gave me the ick. Without knowing the full context, I think it's a bit difficult to sort of say, and I don't want to, lay everything out for you, because you may want to read it and you may want it to be a surprise when you do read it. But overall, these were quite wholesome stories, and they just all gave me the warm fuzzies, even if they did make me cry a little bit. And then we have ended the year with Lightfall by Ed Crocker, and this is his No Humans Here book. So we have 3 races of immortals. We have sorcerers, werewolves, and vampires. We are mainly following vampires, although we do have a werewolf and a couple of sorcerers that are quite pivotal to the story in this book. So a very, very rough overview of the plot. Around 100 years ago, these mysterious figures known as the Greys came and just started murdering everyone indiscriminately. So people fled, and since then have lived in terror of the Greys. And where this story picks up is that the leader of this vampire city, his youngest son has been killed by the Greys, but like he shouldn't have been able to be killed by them because he was beyond the city walls. And why was he beyond the city walls? What was going on? So this story is largely an investigation into his murder, but along the way, a lot of secrets are being revealed around things that have been bubbling under the surface of this vampire society. This is a book where it's very clear a lot of careful thought has been put into the world building, and I'm obsessed. Like, I can't wait to read the further books in this series, but this book isn't even out till next month, so like I'm gonna be waiting a minute here. But alongside this gorgeous world building, very tender, thoughtful writing, lyrical at times, where we have passages from texts and songs, we also have humour sprinkled in, and it is dry British humour that I just started chuckling at random bits in this book because the humour is so subtle. Oh my gosh. I apparently don't have the proper words to convey how much I love this book, but it was one of my favourite books that I've read in 2024, so I'm so happy to have finished my reading year on it. And with that, it is the end of this video. So thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget to leave some comments about, you know, if you have any thoughts about whether this format is something that works for you, if you want me to change things up a bit. But until next time, love you. Bye.